Let's make planting this year's garden a lot easier with the Planter app. This app is packed full of features. It has companion and combative planting, which are indicated by green and red circles. It has a simple drag and drop interface. It has 80 plus plants and thousands of varieties. All the info is needed to grow veggies, including when to start seeds, transplant, and harvest, the ability to create custom plants and varieties, a growing guide with in-depth articles to supplement the quick info in the app, not to mention that you can view it and use it both on your PC and on your mobile device, so you can always be planting your garden on the go. This app is used in my garden year-round to plan the upcoming seasons, reference the last year's seasons so I know when to rotate, and it also helps me to learn more about companion planting using the visual cues. When you create your garden, it's going to be based on the dimensions, and each block is going to be a square foot. I've had a lot of fun using this app, and the Planter app, which is spelled Planter, is available in your app store on both Google and Apple. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and plan your garden, and use the link below to get a discount on the Planter app.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds, and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
What do you think the chances are that somebody is listening to this show right now and they've been trying to grow something and it's just kicking their butt? Well, you're in good luck or you're not in good luck, but you're in good company because we have the same issue. And that's what we're going to talk about today. These crops are the ones that give us the most issue, right? Mm-hmm. So that being said, is it the crops that we did this year that we're growing this year or just in general that are giving us an issue?
Both.
All right. We're going to mix a cake. We're going to make it happen, Captain. Mm-hmm. So this could be either one, but more than likely they're going to be in our gardens. Yeah. So.
Well, it could be even, it's given us such trouble. It's been such a stinker that we've sworn it off from our gardens this year.
Never.
So how about that?
Never swear something off. Actually, I take that back. Because that's a lie. I want to say before we get started, thank you to everybody that supports the show. If you'd like to become a patron or an Apple subscriber, and you will get a episode every month from us exclusive to you, but you also get the good feeling in your heart that you are helping support this show and helping other gardeners. There it is. All right. Now, I have been looking out in my garden, and I have seen a number of things, and I have been taking notes. And there are some things that I struggle with and some things that I don't. Mm-hmm. You're giving me the death stare. It's making me very uncomfortable, by the way.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. I try every year. I know you do, but do you try? I know you try different varieties, but do you try different like total crops? Try to do something new every year?
I have been trying, but it's not, I don't know if it's been a lackluster effort for me, but a good example of something I tried new this year was a different type of winter squash, and I just don't know if it's going to make it, man.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I just saw it pop from the soil, like last week, and it's like mid-June. Remember I told you June 21st, I sowed seeds and it was a disaster. Anyway, I have started to do less and less new things because there's so many things that have been new from these previous years. I'm still trying to get my head around. I can basically, if you call it a vegetable, I can tell you the number of years I've been growing it. It's either a lot of years or I can tell you the specific number of years. And that's to say, like, if I tell you the number of years, I'm not confident. That's what I say on my videos. Like, I'll never say that for tomatoes because, I'm confident in growing tomatoes. But if you tell me if I mention broccoli, I'm like, this is my 3rd year growing broccoli. Be kind to me, viewers. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah. I feel like I'm comfortable growing tomatoes, but there's always like a cloud over my head when it comes to tomatoes. Like, I feel like sometimes I'm just missing like some piece of it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like I know I can do it. I do it every year, every single year, and always have. But it seems like there's just this one little thing and it's crazy. Every year I learn something new. So it's weird how that works out.
But I think to survive with what we do, and again, because it's not our primary gig, it's not like, your 9 to 5, whatever that would be in garden hours. For us to basically get through the year, you have to have some things that you feel good about growing. Yeah. Again, you may stumble, into some trouble, but you feel confident that you're going to come out of the other end of it, because that's the only way you can make room for all of the other stuff that we'll talk about today. That continues to give you a hard time. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, the reason why I asked about the, stuff we've grown in the past or stuff now is because, like corn for me it's not giving me a hard time this year, but it has in the past. And I'm closer to being successful than I've ever been before. So truth moment, I've never harvested an ear of corn out of my garden. I've never come close to harvesting an ear of corn out of my garden. I tried to do a couple things before where, like, last year, I don't know what I took out. Oh, I grew carrots, and then I took the carrots out, and then I tried to plant corn, and it was just too late. So I go through this, I have this website, I talk about it everywhere, always, but it's because it's a great reference. My extension service gives me, not me personally, but they have out there where for your area, when to plant certain crops. And corn has a huge swath of time. But it didn't work out for me last year. And last year I was close. So I planted like a patch of like 5 corn seeds, whatever. And I got one stalk that got pretty big, but I just didn't take good care of it. So this year I did a whole bed. My wife basically said, look, if you don't grow corn, we're going to have an issue. So I said, okay, well, I don't want no issues, ma'am. So we started growing it, and they're all doing the Fat Joe. They're just leaning back, So I was trying to figure out like what's going on with that. And I've grown stuff in this bed before, but I've figured out that they're leaning towards the sun because they're not getting the amount of sun that the corn wants. Not any plant, but just the corn. I mean, it has to be if they're all leaning the same direction, right?
Well,
one would think.
I think that I also, so planting depth, we almost never talk about.
Okay, well, let's talk about it, please.
Yeah, only when we did the Used to Grow series. But I was looking at one particular ear of corn that's coming up, and it's like it's doing the wobble, So, and I was saying to myself, because I've sowed corn in this little small bed 3 times now. Come back around and resowed. And so I'm wondering if that particular, it's probably a result of me resowing. Maybe I didn't sow it deep enough. Corn has this weird root system. Yeah. So all of that said, it absolutely could be, if they're all doing the same thing, it could be that, it isn't getting the light it needs, or it could be the depth you sowed the seeds at. Maybe it wasn't deep enough for it really to establish itself. So that's a thing that I'm exploring as I watch a couple of my ears of corn.
That's an interesting thought.
I should say stalk.
That's an interesting thought. I haven't thought about that. I typically go 2 times the depth of the thickness of the seed, which corn's pretty damn thick. But I've also seen where some stuff will do fine if you go 4 times the depth. Like real deep, like especially like carrots and stuff. Like I was surprised how deep you can go with those. So that's interesting. I have to look into that. But, so right now my corn's about knee high, roughly. It's tasseling. I think it's starting to form the tassels. Again, not really, don't know what I'm doing. So this is all news to me. But I went down the... went and looked it up, and I was like, it's knee high, but it's tasseling. What I think is tasseling, it's got to be. Why is it so short? And I got into like growth stages and like how like when it tassels, it really starts to shoot up or something, or when the tassels start to form. So they're not like brown or anything; they're still green, and that's when it's going to start, elongating. I can't say that word very good. So this is like all a new thing for me, but this is the 3rd year now that I've tried to grow corn, and the most I've dedicated to the corn. So I don't know if I don't think it's fair for me to say it gives me problems every year because I didn't put a lot of effort into it.
Well, I'm rooting for you and for the corn in particular. I mean, primarily for your marriage's sake.
Yeah.
Corn is one of those things, and I think I've tried to grow it 4 years. I've been successful 3 years of the 4, something like that. Yeah. But you hear I'm saying number of years here, and it's one of those vegetables, and you're not quite there yet, but like the timing of it is so essential. Like from the point of it being, you're enjoying the sweet nectar to it being, mouth mush.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's like a couple days. Yeah. Yep. And so the variety I got's actually known to be like, you get like a 10-day window. So I was like, okay, I can deal with a 10-day window because at some point you will see ears of corn, and you're just chomping at the bit at that point. So I was willing to do that.
It's interesting because when you think about something like corn, and it's one of the handful of crops that critters are always attacking.
Yeah.
So not only do you have to get the timing right when it comes to harvesting it at the point where it's sweet, because if you harvest it too early, it's not going to continue to get sweet. It's done.
Yeah. If
you harvest it too late, it's going to be really starchy. But then you're also trying to beat, the birds and the squirrels and so on. So it's interesting because it's such a popular crop when it comes to mass production, right? The number of things that corn turns into. I couldn't stomach being like just a corn grower. So, you think about like you're risking it all. Of course, you're able to become like a subject matter expert in it once you do. But for me in my little space, I'm looking at it and I'm committed this year to enjoy 98% of the ears of corn that I grow.
Yeah.
That's it. 98%.
So there's a lot of farms around me, and they rotate every year between corn and soybeans. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure they're corn and soybeans. And this year they're doing corn, so it's working out really good because I'll go drive around and be like, all right, what's their corn look like? All right, we're good. We good. We're starting to get there. You know what I mean? So I can tell that, like, okay, I'm not too... Because at one point, I looked at it and I was like, man, I'm way behind. And then I came out a couple days later, and when I say a couple days, I mean a couple days, and it was like caught up to their corn. So it's like the growth pattern on it is insane. But...
Yeah, look up, this is more so for the listeners who haven't seen it or grown it. I'm sure I don't have a video to reference in particular, but there are a million of them. It's an exaggeration, of course.
Probably
progression
not.
Videos.
For corn?
Yeah. I did something that was like, month 1, month 2, and so on last year, and I thought it was pretty cool. I just had this moment of like, no, I grew corn before last year. You know what happened? I didn't pay attention to the corn growing the year before that because I was watching corn in the way that like it emerges, like it looks like a little cylinder. I thought it was super cool. And it's like, how do you think that if how does this like come to your head if you've already grown it? Anywho, I'm rambling now. The whole point on the progression of corn, it's one of those crops that I kind of feel like you got to babysit a little bit. And so that is one of the reasons why I have a couple of they give me a hard time on my list.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy corn. But let me move on to mine.
Well, hold on. Let me just say this one part. No. So I just looked up the growth stage thing, and I'm going to briefly take 30 seconds to summarize it for you.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Okay. It has numbers of growth stages, very technical. From VE to V1, V3, V7, V10, VT, R1, and then R6. And so these are different, labelings for the stages. And if you feel so inclined and you want to say, like, hey, where's Ben's corn at? I'm at stage V7 right now. So that's where I'm at. I don't know, but it's crazy to me because you can buy corn for 30 cents an ear or whatever. And then you look at this and you're like, this is way more technical than I signed up for, like straight up. But the good thing about this is it tells you like the time that it takes to get to a certain height and then what the nutrition needs are for it at this specific stage. And it is easy to tell what stage you're in. So if you feel so inclined to get technical, but I'm going to move on from that because it stresses me out.
Okay. Leonard. I thought we discussed not letting him go down that rabbit hole. All right, moving along. Strawberries, man. I'm going to get in and out. They are delicious when you get them.
Yeah.
They are similar to corn when it comes to the harvest time. You need to pick them, before something else gets to them or before they start to get mushy. One of the most disappointing things in the garden is when you go to pick a strawberry and it looks beautiful and it's red, and then you turn it over and someone's chewed on it. Something's chewed on it. I think that once you figure out how to grow strawberries, you probably know it for life. And I've not figured it out. I've tried to grow strawberries over the last 10 or 12 years, I'll try for a couple of years and then just say the hell with it. Now I'll start trying again. I do think that they're heavy feeders. I think that there's some rules around strawberries that I'm just not so interested in following. I believe everything that I experience with strawberries is absolutely the gardener. I believe that I am my own worst enemy when it comes to growing strawberries. I don't want to follow the recommendation of pinching the flowers the first year. So sacrificing the harvest essentially is a recommendation I've read from what I'd say is a reputable source. I don't want to grow as many strawberries as I think I need to. Like, I don't want to give that much space up in my garden. And only because I've had such poor performance of strawberries. And then the whole maintenance of clipping runners or clipping them and then replanting them, like, that's just a whole thing. Like, I feel like they're kind of high maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, do you have to replant the runners though? You can just clip them.
You don't have to. It feels like the responsible thing to do though.
I mean, I guess. I don't know. I'm right there, like, I mean, I don't know who's in the driver's seat on this one because they give me a headache too. I know that
I don't clip runners, just for the record, but I mean, I think you're supposed to.
Yeah, and so I mean, I've been stepping and walking all over my strawberry patch all year, which is kind of a headache. At first I started off this year and I was like, screw it, I'm not growing it anymore. But then I started doing this thing this year where I started Googling production per plant of certain crops. And so I did for the strawberries, and it's saying here, and I do not know if this is a reputable source. Seems kind of crazy to me, but we're going to go with it. It says you should get 1 quart of strawberries per year for each plant, no matter what variety you're growing. So that can be June bearing, ever bearing, or day neutral strawberries. I do not have that experience. I had probably 10 out there, and I may have gotten a quart out of it in 1 year out of all 10 plants. So apparently I am way behind on my production.
This is either the right answer, or at least the common answer, or we're looking at the same source. So the description I read was, with proper care, it is not uncommon for each strawberry plant to produce a full quart of strawberries. Approximately 25 strawberry plants should adequately supply a normal family with delicious strawberries.
How many?
How many plants? 25.
Yeah, I'm not going to grow 25 plants.
Yeah, and I'm not even going to touch on the idea of the normal family, but, moving right along. So, yeah, I mean, the space that it takes is... When I first tried to grow strawberries, I'm almost certain I tried it in containers, which is possible. But I had no idea how big strawberry plants got.
Yeah.
Like 25 plants, like, I think that's probably one of my larger raised beds, like maybe my 10 by 4.
I bet that's a 25-foot row, I would say.
25-foot row?
I bet so, yeah. That's
so a strawberry plant every foot?
Roughly, yeah, maybe 8 inches to a foot. Because I know we go to we have a couple U-pick farms around us, which is where we get our strawberries. And they're about roughly a foot apart, maybe a little less. And that being said, like, I've been going out there for a couple of years and they all grow them the same way. And I'm thinking about mimicking them, where it's, you mound the soil up 6 to 8 inches, you plant the strawberry, or you put the black plastic down, put the strawberry in, bada bing, bada boom, you get the strawberries. But I don't know. I just, as little luck as I've had with them. Well, and the benefit of that too would be it would keep the things from chewing on your strawberries as well.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to ask. The mound must be to keep the strawberries off the ground.
It's got to be
as much as possible.
Because that's what I see like across the board when I've been to a strawberry. And I've been to quite a few strawberry farms, believe it or not. And across the board, they're all grown like that.
I know it wasn't, but I'm going to go ahead and call that a flex.
No, it wasn't. The only reason why it's a flex is it's actually the opposite flex because I can't grow them so bad that I have to go spend my money to go to the farms and pick them.
No, it's funny because I can see your face and I know it's absolutely not a flex and you're not one to flex, but I think it's funny. Like in my memory bank, the thing I'm going to remember about strawberries is like you're touring the world strawberry farms.
Yeah, well, when we lived in New England, that's when we got into the you pick thing. And that worked out really well because we can make our jellies. And because even if I had a 25-foot row, I wouldn't have enough to make jellies. I would just have enough to eat. You know what I mean?
Oh, that hurts my heart.
Yep. It's painful.
Oh, okay. I'm going to move on. Well, I'm not going to move on. I'm going to add this to future episode list, Leonard. If you could ever get this bit right. I keep on wanting, I'm babbing on the microphone. I keep on wanting to come back to it. Index finger pointing. I keep on wanting to come back to the idea that what does it produce? Like, I was doing the math of 25 feet. Like, I could, and again, I'm not your normal family based on what I believe this person is describing. And in my mind, I'm picturing strawberry jelly or jam or whichever one it is. I actually have it on my grocery store list. I could taste it. And you're basically telling me that I'm just going to have strawberries, with my daiquiris now. That's what I'm going to get from it. I mean, that is worth something, but yeah.
Yeah, I've actually started playing around with that this year, what you're talking about. So I would love to talk about that at some point. Because that is the ultimate question when you go to plan something, is how much am I going to get off of this? Because the last thing you want is, to have, 15 tomato plants growing and you're like, you can't even touch the first bit of tomatoes on 2 of them, and you're just wasting space at that point. But that gets into more of a very methodical, planned way of gardening, which I think gardening does lend itself to anyways, being very methodical about what you're doing. For sure. So this is one of those moments where a real friend, if I were Ben's real friend, I would just say, okay, great. Look forward to talking about it. But instead, what I'm going to say is I've been trying to talk about this for 3 years. And this is one of those moments where you just basically have to wait until your partner is ready, right? And he's right. He has his little notepad. He's writing it down like it's a brand new concept, right? That's a great idea, Batavia. I can't believe you came up. I've never heard anybody suggest that before.
Absolutely. No, we touched on this just a little bit. Well, no, there is a bit of a spin. We touched on this in a recent episode around, I think we were talking about green beans and the idea of how many green beans, like preserving some, but then also, I think it was filling gaps in your garden episode around, well, maybe I'll just eat these fresh, and so there is that bit of, how many you're going to actually grow and what you're going to do with it, I guess, is the bottom line of it. Well,
and we're going to move on after this comment, but I did briefly touch.
Is that right? We're going to move on after your
after comment? My comment, okay. We're going to move on. Yeah, okay. Because if you don't, then you're just going to open Pandora's box. But I have.
You're the closer of the box.
I'm the closer of the box. I got to keep it closed. Yeah, we got to keep it closed. In a previous video I did on YouTube, I did crack this subject and what I think I have kind of figured out. And there was a bunch of combinations of things that I came up with. And I mean, again, and I said something else in another video where like, hey, if it works for me, it's got to be right for me, right? But it's like the way I justified what I was growing and how much I was going to get out of it. And being realistic about it, like this says 1 quart of strawberries per plant. You and I know we ain't going to get a quart of strawberries off a plant, even if I went out there and sang lullabies to them every night, So there's a whole thing behind that. And I think that it is something that once you figure that out, and you're never going to get an exact number, you can really do some damage in a garden. But you got to figure it out. And there's a lot of internal questions that we have to ask ourselves. So
yeah, I'm gonna let you lead us down the road of closing this.
Yep. So that's closed.
So it's on you.
Yep. So, we've talked about this crop a lot on the show, and we've bastardized it, and then we brought it back, and we've raised it up on its praises and all this stuff. Do you know what it could be?
Yeah, I do.
What is it?
It's cabbage.
No, it's broccoli.
Okay. Oh, okay. I thought when I put in the chat about broccoli, remind me, but not on this episode.
I didn't see it until now.
I figured you wouldn't bring up broccoli.
I didn't see it until just then. No, broccoli, man. It's I grow it every year, and it's been a difficult one for me, and it's just because of my temperatures is why it's been difficult. Mm-hmm. But that's still like a very valid issue because it'll bolt. Yeah. So I think it was the last episode, maybe it was after the last episode, you and I were talking, and I said, I got to go start my seeds, right? Mm-hmm. Was that on the episode or off of it? Either way.
It was off the episode. Okay. Yeah, we talked a good long time, too.
Yeah, we did. So anyways, sure enough.
It felt like a whole nother episode. That's why you're like, was it on?
So I went on and I said, I went and started my seeds. And then I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, it's really hot outside. Like, am I setting myself up for failure for bolting broccoli? And so I went down the rabbit hole and I was looking at what stage of growth does that determine when the broccoli is going to bolt. So my question was, like, if you put a seed in the ground right now, wherever you are, and it gets to be 100 degrees, will that automatically bolt? Because, lettuce will do that. It'll come up and it'll just bolt. And so I started going down the rabbit hole with that and reading about it. And from what I understand, do you want to play a game?
No.
Okay, we won't play a game then. That sucks. They don't necessarily bolt like... My phone thinks that I want to play a game. It just listened to me. It thinks that I don't think until it starts to produce that head that the temperature actually wants to bolt. Does that make sense?
Say it again.
Until it starts to produce that head, I don't think you need to worry about it bolting.
Oh, okay.
So then you start worrying about timing, right? But what causes it to bolt?
We've covered this in an episode. I doubted you in the episode. Now you're positioning me to be the person, the co-host that's basically saying, a second time, I really don't believe you. You need more people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe I've believed that it's heat.
It is heat. That is correct. It is heat. But from what I understand, it's the heat to the roots, not the leaves. That was what was interesting to me. So I went out there and I said, okay, I've got some mulch on the ground. I got this bed that's not even planted right now. I'm waiting to put my Brussels sprouts in. Let me slide my little hot hand underneath the mulch and see the temperature difference. It was amazing, the difference between the piece that was not mulched and the piece that was. It was a good 10 to 15 degrees difference. Like, it was cool to the touch underneath the mulch.
So I don't normally do this, but two people in the course of 1 week, completely different parts of my life. I don't know either of these people, but one person commented on YouTube, another person passed my garden and was chatting with me, and they both commented about using super cold water when watering things. This is like in this bed that had broccoli and cabbage. And I must have in both situations commented around like, the weather, they don't like hot, weather, that's, you'll hear me yelling down the block every day and twice on Sundays in my front yard. And so both of them came back with a comment. And so again, when I say I don't normally do this, I don't know if this is like true or an old wives' tale, right? But the idea of keeping that soil cool. And then there's that whole idea of like soil temperature that we hate, so there could be something there.
We're going to find out this year.
Uh-oh, here we go.
Yeah. Think about it though. Watering your plants with super cold water, how realistic is that?
Well, I know that the water, the first commenters like ice cold water. I'm like, I don't know where you live or what you're talking about, but when I water first thing in the morning, which I typically try to do, that water is really cold to the touch.
Yeah.
Let that hose sit out there for, at 9 o'clock and try to run that thing. It's like, get me a little bowl and put my feetsies in, my little footsies, and I'll have a little like foot sauna or something, because that water gets hot really quick.
But that's the water coming from the hose. Once you get past that initial flush of water, you get some pretty cool water that comes out, man. Yeah. So, I mean, I think if you compound all these things together, I think it'll make a difference.
Yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't normally do this. Like, this could be just a whole bunch of nonsense.
It could be.
Well,
and I think the only thing, I don't think watering with cold water is, but I think the difference between leaf temperature and root temperature, there may be something there, as you would say.
Yeah. I do think, not to just be whiny about it, I do think that this is another thing I put in the chat that I basically said, we'll talk about in another episode. I do believe that some of these answers are there for us and we just don't want to look for them.
Yeah.
I believe some of these things are more simple. And I think it's easier to cut through all of the minutia. Right? Like we latch on to a thing like, oh, it's 90 degrees. This thing's going to bolt. And that becomes like, the gospel. Real quick note on broccoli. I had two of the main heads left. And they were pretty still small. Like they weren't these huge, like elephant size broccoli heads. I just made that thing up. And so I said, well, let's see if it gets a little bit larger. Again, I bought, maybe it's like lieutenant broccoli. That's the ones that the big box stores always sell as starts. And I waited a day. Now, the other broccoli, I had maybe like 2 or 3 of the heads that already started to, what did they call them? The buds had already started to change colors. So, that's the first sign of we're wrapping this thing up, girl. And so anyway, I waited a day. Listening to you from the last episode, I put a pail on top of them like, I'm going to block the sun. I came back the next day, brown. Right? I didn't even go get my pruners or a knife. I pinched that broccoli head off. Look, I finished my garden chores, went inside, cooked it up. It was delicious. Don't get me wrong. But it kind of going back to the idea of, you know what you know when you know it. Now, variety obviously matters. When I plant it, obviously matters. And I would probably add it to the list of things that have given me trouble. And it's just based on primarily timing, to be quite frank. I mean, that's probably the bottom line of it for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same for me. It's like I try to grow it in the spring, and invariably what it does is it starts to form a head and then it bolts. And then I try to grow it in the fall, and invariably what happens is it gets cold and it just sits there for the winter. And if it makes it through the winter, then I get a harvest. So the question becomes is like, how do I get that harvest at fall when I want to get the harvest? Not necessarily, let me change that to not when I want to get the harvest, but when you technically should be getting a harvest, when everybody's like, it's the perfect time of year. I got my pumpkin latte and I'm, all this stuff. And it's like, I just want my damn broccoli, people.
8 weeks from transplant to harvest. And I probably could have pulled it all at 7. That was this spring.
Yeah.
I probably could have pulled it at 7. Now again, my 8 weeks, don't try this at home, kids, was April 15th-ish to whatever 8 weeks is later, like June 10th. And so when I talk about like perhaps it's pointing back to the gardener, right? Like my extension service, I'm sure says that I can put out broccoli starts probably 3 weeks before my average last frost. So that would put me back into March instead of planting them in April. Now, all of that said, the rule of thumb is not the rule of thumb. Like you can't just assume every day earlier you plant means you're going to harvest earlier. But there's something around that, right? 8 weeks makes me a believer in broccoli, to be quite frank. There's not a lot that I'm getting from planting to it's ready to harvest in 8 weeks. I mean, lettuce
planting
and
a transplant to harvest in 8 weeks.
Yeah, transplant. Yeah. From, what did I say?
You said planting,
Planting.
not harvest.
Yeah. So don't, we're not talking about direct seeding, right? These were nice transplants that had probably about 4 or 5 true leaves. So sizable. So yeah, I mean, I think that and it, especially for me, even if it's the spring only, that makes it worth my while, but it doesn't mean that it's not a problem child.
Well, you know what I keep thinking about too and you can insert any vegetable into all of this, that bolts. And you just brought up direct seeding, and that's kind of what I keep thinking about is, all right, you and I know that like direct seeding is just not really a thing. It's not going to work out for us, right? How the hell did they do it back in the day? They direct seeded it, and they got. I mean, if not, wouldn't nobody ever eat no damn broccoli? You know?
I think that the thing that we don't talk about though, it's not like every garden everywhere was making broccoli.
You say that, but
I did.
There's definitely like recipes, like old recipes that have been handed down in old cookbooks and stuff that like, if you could only grow broccoli, let's say in California, you can't get ahead of broccoli over here until the invention of the damn car. You know what I'm saying? And without a damn road. So how are people eating broccoli here before that? It's not one of those crops that's just like, no, it's not going to grow there. You know what I mean? It's just one of those crops that I think you got to crack the code for.
I think that maybe we need like investigative discovery, like a show on that channel or something. Like you leaned up and then I got to the point where I'm all like, wait, hold on. Wait, but how?
I mean, you can mix it in. It's aliens. Do they exist? And how do we get broccoli? I mean, but I'm just saying, like, that's kind of like what's triggered in my mind is like at some point, people figured out how and when to plant broccoli in order to get a harvest.
Yeah, for sure. Which again goes back to the direct seed part. It's kind of like, mind blown. That was a terrible sound effect. But that's what I'm known for. But I think again, it's if I be a bit more obedient to my extension service, right? They're like, girl, we've made charts, we've made graphs, we've put this in tables, like, just do it.
And Batavia's like, no, come plant my garden for me, and then I'll learn.
Right?
So that's my stance on broccoli. I just, I love to hate it, but I want to love it. Yeah. And it's like, once I figure it out, it's game on. Yeah, and maybe this will be the year. I don't know.
Okay, you're doing fall broccoli.
I'm 100% doing fall broccoli. I always was going to do fall broccoli, but the way I stand now is my seeds are started in a seed tray outside in the shade. As soon as they pop, I'm more than likely going to bring them inside. And then because I do feel like I went a little bit early starting them, I'm going to withhold feeding them for a while, and then as it gets closer to what I feel is the time, then I'm going to push the food to them and get them to go. My only thing in my thought process behind it is once I get this broccoli and I take it outside from inside my cool house, what's going to stop it from bolting then? Yeah. Because here it'll stay hot all the way up into September. But if I can combine that with some heavy mulching and keeping that soil cool, and maybe and especially now that I'm doing the in-ground watering, I can adjust my watering time to where it's closer to like 10 o'clock in the morning or something, so it'll cool those roots down. Then we can see like, hey, yeah, this makes a big difference. Cooling the roots makes a big difference versus the leaves.
So is it recommended that you grow broccoli in the spring or the fall, or is it here said to be both? Yeah.
Well, based on based on my extension service, I'll just tell you the time of year that they have recommended planting the most. It's the spring that they have it planting the most. So you have like a 2-month period to plant them in the spring, and then a month and a half in the fall. But my experience is I've always had better luck planting them in the fall. I just plant them later in the fall. So actually, I plant them after their last recommended plant date generally. So if I move forward by about 6 weeks of my planting, based on what you said, I should be getting some harvest come October into November. I should start getting them.
Based on what who said?
Based on what you said about your 8 weeks from transplanting. And so see, I'm pulling all this information in, and I don't ever want to discount your experience and what you've recognized, even though you're in a different area, but that growth time is still that growth time.
So did I not say asterisk?
No, it's too late. That's already imprinted in my mind. You're known for two things: asterisks and bad sound effects.
Yeah. That's the standard. Ask all of my friends and loved ones. Exactly that. No, that's the standard though. Like 8 weeks now. Like we've talked about it, and I'm going to move on to my next one. We've talked about a part of the thing when I'm growing new things. You know, I'm enamored by when it first germinates. You know, and I've germinated so much broccoli. It never makes it out of my grow area, but I've germinated a lot of it. You know, so I'm not necessarily, I mean, it all looks the same when it comes to those brassicas and such. But once the plant starts to produce leaves, like I feel like my broccoli plants themselves were smaller this year compared to last year, like the plant, you know, in height and all. But now I kind of like, I have pieces, just like you were assembling them to this formula now. I know when that first thing, I think it was like May 28th or 29th, right around Memorial Day weekend, I saw like a quarter size head. I had to look inside. And I'm telling you that 10 or 11 days later.
It happens fast.
Yeah. And the best part about this show is I just put those pieces together. I forgot about that bit.
That's why I love doing the podcast.
So that's exciting for me.
So let me ask you one more question. You remember when we were talking about seed temperature and seed germination? Mm-hmm. How long does it take your broccoli to germinate have you ever started it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How long does it take it to germinate?
I don't know. I can only remember like dates and times and durations for like the last 30 days. That's it. I'm going to say definitely less than 10 days for the germination.
About 7 to 10 days roughly, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when I did it outside, it's been warm. 1 day.
Really?
1 day. For cabbage and broccoli, I started seeing them pop in 1 day. Can you believe that? So that whole temperature seed germination thing, like you can read about it all day long, but like, damn if it ain't true.
All right. So I'm going to move on to a summer lover. And I don't know that we need to spend much time because once the season really picks up, we're going to be talking about this all the time. Cucumbers. It's one of those things where I love to hate them. I love cucumbers. I enjoy them so much. It is kind of a, you know, like 2-hitter quitter. Like there are only a couple of things I'm really doing with cucumbers, but I still love them. It screams garden to me. But every year me growing cucumbers, it's a different experience. Like I can never I could never be a cucumber farmer, right? Like I'm going to be bankrupt immediately.
Yeah.
Even before I get to the powdery mildew, which kind of is like, you know, it's game over, right? Before I get to that, everything from germination time, everything from production, and I am trying consistently some of the same varieties, you know, and the reason this bit of it is not inherent in the plant necessarily, it's the gardener again. You take one afternoon off, man, you know, and you come back that next morning and you have basically, how did these things turn yellow when this is a variety that produces green cucumbers, you know? So cucumbers, again, they're going to always be in my garden, but they're a bit of a pain for me.
Yeah. I don't know if they're a pain for me. Well, I tell you, the past 2 years they've been a pain, but this year so far is going good. I ate my first cucumber in 2 years the other day.
Wow.
Yep. I did not eat anything that I did not grow because I don't like grocery store cucumbers at all. And I went back to my old standby, which is the Boston pickling cucumber. And it's worked well for me. But it's like you said, I mean, it's a lot like okra. Like you got to get it when you get there, and it's better to get an immature one because what I've experienced and what I've read also, so I can say they're both together, is once that cucumber turns yellow, that plant knows to stop producing. So it's almost like you might as well rip it up and put something new in, which is a shame, but it's so quick. It's just, they grow so fast.
I think that I'm just in denial. Like, I don't believe that, but I think I see it every year.
Yeah.
You know, and a part of it, it's kind of like, well, dang, so you're telling me that I could just ruin this whole thing. You know, like you look up.
It's rant.
And what's that?
I said it's rant. You just gave it up.
Yeah. But again, I'm watching cucumbers grow year over year. I've actually decreased the number of cucumber plants. Like I probably had at one point like 12 different cucumber plants all over my garden. And that's just, again, when they're prolific, baby, you know. And so as I've ramped down, I'm basically rolling the dice because I realize that I may get lower production based on any number of things. One thing I haven't done, which maybe it really isn't even recommended, is I'm not consistent in the place I grow cucumbers. Right, you know, so I'm going back to a place this year growing them that I had great success like 3 years ago. And we'll see. Our weather coming from May into June has just been so unpredictable. Like we've had mornings in the low 50s. Yeah. You know, so these plants are really taking their sweet time. I mean, this is still full on spring. This is like, although it's wrapping up closer to summer now, this feels like by the time you all hear this, we'll be in summer, but this really feels like mid-spring to me weather. Cool nights, you know, it's been pretty dry, which I know a lot of folks have experienced, but so I'm kind of shrugging my shoulders. We'll see what happens with all of these crops, to be quite frank.
Yeah, you never know. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll stick with your summer, and I'm going to say peppers. I grow peppers, I harvest peppers, but I never get the production I want off of my peppers. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's just more in the tank. You know what I mean? I feel like there's more to be had out of them. So this year I did something totally different, and I say basically because it's not totally, but I planted a pepper bed to try and see how that's going to work out. We'll see how it goes. I mean, so far they're loaded down, but as the summer wears on, they start to get it. I mean, they take a beating. Yeah. And so there's a lot of things different in my garden this year that can help with a lot of these things. Like I'm not overhead watering anymore, which I'm really curious how this is going to work out, you know, because there's a big investment. There's a big investment of time and money. And so, you know, I was about cucumbers last night. I was looking something up I was on some chat room or something. I don't know. Anyway, somebody posted a picture of a cucumber. Looked like it had rust disease on it. And on
the cucumber or the leaves?
The leaves.
Yeah, okay.
Which, you know, if the leaves are struggling, the plant's going to struggle. So,
yeah.
But the one thing that I saw, everybody was saying rust. And then somebody else chimed in. And I don't know if it's like a in-ground water warrior or what it is, but it was like you get water on your leaves, and then it can cause that. And so I'm curious to see like how that works out for me, because I'm not doing that, if I'm going to see more or less of that, because I definitely have noticed as like cucumbers and peppers and stuff like that start to get old, their leaves will start to kind of dry out a little bit. You know, you get that rust look to them. And I just would hate to think that every year my garden is totally riddled with rust disease. Like I just don't feel like that's the case. But the same thing happens with my peppers, long story short. So it's like I figure there's got to be something that I'm missing to the peppers, and I just can't figure out. So I'm feeding them more, and I'm injection feeding them. So I'm feeding the roots more. So we'll see how that's working out, you know?
Yeah, I have, for the first time in quite a while, started to experience like a subpar production or plant growth, and I am all but certain it is based on the soil. So remember those two long, narrow beds in the front yard that I dug up that I talked about all winter? So one's by the fence where I've grown sunflowers for the last handful of years, or last few years, and then the others are on the side of, on the inside of the bed underneath the trellis. And so there is a little bit of shading, which is amazing when you think about how high the sky is and how unobstructed that yard is. But there actually absolutely is, like, this is only the second season I've grown in that soil. And that soil is basically the soil that was underneath my garden, underneath my grass for decades. And so it is not the quality that's in the rest of my beds. And the production of what's growing in there, I believe it's directly related to that. Even with the idea of me adding compost to it, I still think we're probably some years away from that being a really productive, kind of fertile bit of soil. So I bring this up because when it comes to cucumbers, I know that you've been expanding your garden and you've basically been introducing new soil and such. And I wonder if you go back to look at kind of where you've been growing these cucumbers. Are they in the old version of your garden or the new version of your garden?
They're in the wild garden this year, which I've never planted in the wild garden either. Mm-hmm. So how many bell peppers do you think you get off of a plant?
Oh, good gosh. I'm going to say about half a dozen. Yeah,
so it's saying that a bell pepper plant should get anywhere between 8 to 10 bell peppers in a season, roughly. And that's for a longer season, so you should be right on par with that. Yeah. So it's interesting when you see that, because it's like, that's it? So after let's say I get 8 bell peppers, should I just pull the pepper up?
Well, you reminded me of, there's so many, like, I need Leonard really to step up. Like, if he wants his promotion, he really needs to step up, because, like, I'm looking at it saying, are we going to fire him or not? And he's looking at it saying, like, I want more responsibility, which for these young kids just means more money, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, we talked about this last year. I forgot about it until this moment. And I'm going to forget about it by the time my pepper plants start producing peppers anyway. But I prefer to let my bell peppers, as an example, completely ripen. So whatever color, yellow, brown, purple, red, they're supposed to get to, I let them get to that. But that ultimately slows down how many peppers are being produced on that plant.
Right.
And so I need to actually add a note in my calendar for this, because I'm really curious. I have about 6 bell peppers that are supposed to turn red in one space. It may even be more. And it's very intentional. But now I'm curious if they're in the same space. If I take just one plant and harvest all of the green peppers that are coming to size, I want to see how many I get off of that plant compared to. I mean, it seems like it's very logical. Like, well, you're going to get more, right? I just don't think my season's long enough to basically whip up more peppers. I think it's going to be very near the same quantity. I'm just going to have more green peppers off of that plant than the other.
Well, I mean, you let them ripen inside. They'll ripen. I mean, I think you'll lose a little bit of sweetness, but, typically that's what has happened to me, I think, is I'll let them, same as you, I want to pick a red pepper. That's what I want. But in the time it takes from it to get green to red, that's when the plant declines. And so I'm thinking it's just like a cucumber, like maybe we should be pulling them and letting them ripen inside, just like you do in your fall tomatoes or something, at the end of fall. I mean, maybe that's like a method. I mean, I know it's a method, but it just seems like the health of the plant really declines around this time. Now, this year where they're planted too, they're going to get afternoon shade, so maybe they get too hot, and this is going to help eliminate that altogether.
See, my logic is for the peppers, like I know for sure, similar to tomatoes, I pull a lot of green peppers off of my plants at the end of the season anyway. So that's another reason why I'm like, let those get vine ripe when they can. But they will sit on my counter or on my dining room table for weeks. Right before they start spoiling, as long as your house isn't super hot, right? So anywho, I mean, I think that it's, peppers, add that to the list of the thing of, how many plants I get. This is actually a pretty common question I get on my YouTube channel. How many plants do you plant? Right? Which is kind of the thing underneath that is how many peppers does that produce? But people don't ask that necessarily, right? So anywho, I think, are we wrapped? We do 3 and 3?
Yeah, you want to just leave it at that and we'll go to the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah, because the next one could be like 30 minutes. We don't know. At the rate we're going today. There are others, but, it is what it is. So today's question comes from the Backyard Gardens Facebook group. And what's the name of it, Batavia?
Backyard Gardens Community Garden.
There you go. You can come find us there and enjoy all the spoils of it. And by the way, the people that are on there, your gardens are amazing. Thank you so much for posting your pictures when we ask for them. Brian posted a picture of his eggplants. And he says, my eggplant is producing like crazy this year. Is this too much production for the eggplants to mature fully? And so in this little picture we have here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 eggplants, and 6 of them are probably, if I had to estimate, about 4 to 5 inches long, and then probably 3 inches thick. They're the big oval type, maybe like a Black Beauty or something like that. So what do you think?
Hey, Brian. I tried to get in there quick and say hello to you, but my buddy here just kept on talking. I had my hand raised. I think variety matters. I have seen eggplants in my garden, a single plant, produce like 10 eggplants at a time, and they were fine when it comes to ripening. I think it was more of like the little finger, like it was a more small and narrow eggplant. So that's, again, variety matters. I think this is where go back to see what you planted, because Black Beauty, I expect it to be as big as my head. Like that's what you see in the grocery stores.
This is an estimation of variety, just so you know.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but my point is, so let's say he knows he has Black Beauty, and so he's waiting for this to get, again, as big as my head. And I don't know if they're producing in that same way. I think maybe I saw the question this time. Look at that. Basically, I get to see the question, but I don't get to speak to the gardener. That's how that goes.
Hey, you're on the Facebook page. You know how to talk? Burn.
The restraint I have shown in this episode. You may not be thinking this, but if you are, don't go cutting any of them off. Just make sure you have proper support for it.
Yeah. And he has a big wooden stake in there.
Those things will topple over. You know?
So, I answered him and I said, no, just keep feeding them. Because, in my experience, eggplants are very productive. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's an issue. And it's one of those things, I think it's just like with the peppers and stuff, just harvest early and often, that's the whole thing with all of these is harvest early and nothing. And you'll go through lulls. Like on that plant right there, I don't know the stage in which they were to be harvested. They look like they were about ready at that picture. If you had 8 eggplants on there and 6 of them were ripened, if you pull those 6 off, you're going to be prolonging, and it's going to start pushing more flowers. Yeah. So that's a really good question, though, because we've talked about a lot how, with bell peppers and stuff like that, like the bigger plants with the bigger fruits will produce less than the smaller fruits on them.
Yeah, and it's interesting for a vegetable like eggplant, because it's kind of like your melons. It's kind of like, it's not like a pepper or even a tomato where you could basically pull it off at any time. Yeah. And you could still get to the point of it will be enjoyable. So if you're uber curious, there's obviously also the notes of how many days has it been since you planted it. So days to harvest, you can kind of use that as a combination of other things. Eggplant, it's a purple eggplant that he had. So generally, you want to make sure that it's a shinier, like there's a shiny sheen to the skin. The other side of it, once it goes dull, it's too late. It's overripe. I'd say, if you think it didn't sound like he thought it was getting close. He just wanted to make sure that he didn't have too many to prolong things unnecessarily. But whenever you get closer, feel free to cut one off and cut it open. And there's your gauge.
Well, my whole narrative to it is, first of all, sir, you're doing amazing with your eggplant, and I'd say enjoy it until it just peters out on you and it just gives up, and then go to something next, because chances are with that many eggplants, you fitting to be tired of eating eggplants.
Okay, so I saw the picture through your phone, and now looking at the picture on my phone, the first eggplant that's closer to the camera, to the screen. Ready. Yeah, cut that one off. I think eggplants are beautiful.
I think they're an amazing plant, and I think if you're looking for weight to production, I don't think there's a better plant to grow in the summertime. If you want to count something like that. So,
and I can see he has it staked, so he already,
Yeah, he's got a thick stake.
Ignore all of the stuff you've already done that I gave you as advice, Brian.
Yeah, just enjoy it. But everybody else, you can use it to your advantage. Mm-hmm. All right, everybody. So those were a couple of ours that we just struggle with, and that's okay if you struggle. because once you figure it out, you won the game. So check us out on all our usual places. You can see Batavia at Be Better Gardens on YouTube. You can see me on Sandy Bottom Homestead. Oh, by the way, I'm getting my bees tomorrow, everybody. Just so you know, half of them. Long story behind that. So we're going to do that, and then come join us on Patreon, all that other stuff, Apple subscriptions, and Spotify. Leave us a question or in the Facebook group, and we will get to it on the air. And until next time, remember, everybody, learn to grow and grow for change.
Hey, someone commented on my Instagram that they loved my greens cabinet, or maybe it was YouTube, but either way, they were talking about the cage baby, and it melted my heart. So I'll see you. See ya in the greens cabinet.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya.
If you guys want some Backyard Gardens gear,
go to the link below and check out our t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other gear.
All purchases go towards helping to support the show, so thank you so much in advance, and we hope you enjoy. We want everybody to have a garden, and we're going to give you a chance to win free seeds every month.
Head over to backyardgardenstv.com and enter your email address to be entered in all of our giveaways.
Good luck!
We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners.